So let's say we have our first situation. So we have 3 minus negative 2. All right, so again, using my integers, I'm going to draw 3 positives. Okay, but then what's happening is subtraction means I'm taking away. Now I want to take away 2 negatives, but I don't have 2 negatives to take away, so I'm going to add them. But in order to be able to add these 2 negatives, that's not how much I started with. I need to start with 3, right? That's the first part of my sentence. So if I want to add those 2 negatives, I actually have to balance them out with 2 positives, because what happens here, this is 0 and this is 0. So really, this is 0, so I still start with positive 3, but I added these 2 negatives so that I can actually take them away. And so if we watch what happens, when I take away these 2 negatives, those 2 black integer chips, I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red chips, or 5 positives. Now, if I was to do this on a number line, this is the same thing as saying 3, and I take away, and the negative numbers we said were cold. If I take away the cold, does it get hotter or colder in here? Well, if I'm taking away the cold, it's going to get hotter. So on my number line, I would start at the 3, and then because it's getting hotter, I'm moving up by 2, and I would finish at the positive 5. Now the trick when we're doing this mentally is if I have a subtraction sign and a negative, what I can do is I can flip them. So I can make that 2 negatives, I can make a positive. Okay, so a negative sign and a subtraction sign together, I can flip them to make positives, and then it just becomes 3 plus 5, which is easier to do in our heads. The second situation is if I have negative 2 minus 3. Now, what I can do, okay, let's do our integer chips first. I'm going to draw 2 negatives. And then again, this is taking away 3 positives. But the problem is I don't have 3 positives, so I'm going to put them on my board. But if I wanted to add 3 positives, I also have to add the 3 negatives to balance them out to make 0. Because I have to start with negative 2. So I had to balance these out. Now I can take away those 3 positives. When I take them away, I am left with 5 negatives, which would be our answer. Or I can do my number line. And I'm going to start at my first number. So I'm going to start at negative 2. Okay, so there's my first one. And then I am taking away, and the 3 is positive, so I'm taking away warmth. If I take away warmth, it's going to get colder in here, which means I'm moving down by 1, 2, 3, which ends up at negative 5, which is the same sort of thing. Now, if you ever have this and you're doing it mathematically, negative 2, anytime I have a subtraction sign, I can switch that subtraction sign to addition, okay, just like we did on the first question. However, that means I also have to change the sign behind it. So over up at the top, we did, okay, we turned that subtraction sign into a plus, and we changed that negative into a positive. Here, we changed that subtraction sign to a plus, but we actually have to change that positive into a negative. And now it's just addition. Negative 2 plus negative 3. Well, 2 negatives, 3 negatives gives me 5 negatives. And then the final situation that we would see is negative 2 minus negative 3. Okay, now there's a lot of negative signs in here. I draw my 2 negatives. All right. And then I want to take away 3 negatives. Well, I don't have 3 negatives to take away, so I'm going to put them on there first. But remember, if I want to add them, I have to balance them out because I need to start with a value of negative 2. And then I'm going to take away those 3 negatives. Okay, so if I take away those 3 negatives, let's erase them. They're gone. What value am I left with on my board? Well, notice we can balance out our positives and our negatives. So we actually end up getting left with is positive 1. Now, the same goes for a number line. I'm going to take away Cold. If I take away cold, I am going to be getting hotter, so I'm going to move up on the number line 3, which ends up at positive 1. And again, we can use our trick that we learned, -2. That subtraction sign, we're going to turn that to a plus, and we change the sign of the number behind it. So instead of a -3, it becomes a positive 3. So what this becomes is -2 plus 3, which becomes positive 1, which is the same thing. So we have little tricks with subtraction. With subtraction, the best thing that helps us is the fact that we can actually turn that subtraction to addition as long as we change the sign behind it.